Good morning, class 10. Today we will continue the chapter Making of the Global World. We have to start a new heading today, Indian Entrepreneurs Abroad. Growing food and other food crops for the world market required capital. Large plantations could borrow it from banks and markets. But what about the humble peasants? Enter the Indian banker. Do you know of the Shikaripuri Shroffs and Natukotai Chettiars? They were amongst the many groups of bankers and traders who financed export agriculture in Central and Southeast Asia using either their own funds or those borrowed from European banks. They had a sophisticated system of transfer money over large distances and even developed indigenous forms of corporate organization. Indian traders and money lenders also followed European colonizers into Africa. Hyderabadi Sindhi traders, however, ventured beyond European colonies. From the 1860s, they established flourishing emporia at busy ports worldwide, selling local and imported curios to tourists whose numbers were beginning to swell. Thanks to the development of safe and comfortable passenger vessels, Indian trade, colonialism, and the global system. Historically, fine cottons produced in India were exported to Europe. With industrialization, British cotton manufacture began to expand. Now, children, pay attention. With industrialization, British cotton manufacture began to expand, and industrialists pressurized the government to restrict cotton imports and protect local industries. Tariffs were imposed on cloth imports into Britain. Consequently, the inflow of fine Indian cotton began to decline. From the early 19th century, British manufacturers also began to seek overseas markets for their cloth. Excluded from the British market by tariff barriers, Indian textiles now faced stiff competition in other international markets. If we look at the figures of exports from India, we see a steady decline of the share of cotton textiles. From some 30% around 1800 to 15% by 1815. By the 1870s, this proportion had dropped to below 3%. What then did India export? The figures again tell a dramatic story. While exports of manufactures declined rapidly, export of raw materials increased equally fast. Between 1812 and 1871, the share of raw cotton exports rose from 5% to 35%. Indigo used for dyeing cloth, underline this. Indigo used for dyeing cloth was another important export for many decades. This you have to remember, that indigo was used for dyeing clothes. And as you have read last year, opium shipments to China grew rapidly from the 1820s to become, for a while, India's single largest export. Britain grew opium in India and exported it to China, and with money earned through this sale, it financed its tea and other imports from China. Over the 19th century, British manufacturers flooded the Indian market. Pay attention, this paragraph seems to be important. Over the 19th century, British manufacturers flooded the Indian market. Food, grain, and raw material exports from India to Britain and the rest of the world increased. But the value of British exports to India was much higher than the value of British imports from India. Thus, Britain had a trade surplus with India. Britain used this surplus to balance its trade deficits with other countries. That is, with countries from which Britain was importing more than it was selling to. This is how a multilateral settlement system works. It allows one country's deficit with another country to be settled by its surplus with a third country. By helping Britain balance its deficits, India played a crucial role in the late 19th century world economy. Britain's trade surplus in India also helped pay the so called home charges that included private remittances home by British officials and traders, interest payments on India's external debt, and pensions of British officials in India. Interwar economy. The First World War was mainly fought in Europe, but its impact was felt around the world. Notably, for our concerns in this chapter, it plunged the first half of the 20th century into a crisis that took over 3 decades to overcome. During this period, the world experienced widespread economic and political instability and another catastrophic war. Wartime transformations. The First World War, as you know, was fought between the two blocs. On the one side were the Allies, Britain, France, and Russia, and on the opposite side were the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Ottoman Turkey. When the war began in August 1914, many governments thought it would be over by Christmas. It lasted more than 4 years. The First World War was a war like no other before. The fighting involved the world's leading industrial nations, which now harnessed the vast powers of modern industry to inflict the greatest possible destruction on their enemies. That means they used their technological powers to destroy their enemies. This was thus the first modern industrial war. It saw the use of guns. Now, in this paragraph, they are giving you a reason why the First World War can be called the first modern industrial war. So, keep on underlining the reasons. It saw the use of machine guns, tanks, aircrafts, chemical weapons, etc. on a massive scale. These were all increasingly products of modern large-scale industry. To fight the war, millions of soldiers had to be recruited from around the world and moved to the front lines on large ships and trains. The scale of death and destruction, 9 million dead and 20 million injured, was unthinkable before the industrial age, without the use of industrial arms. Most of the killed and maimed were men of working age. That means those who were killed and those who were injured. Mostly they were men of working age, the age where people do maximum of work, hard work. These deaths and injuries reduced the able-bodied workforce in Europe. With fewer members within the family, household incomes declined after the war. During the war, industries were restructured to produce war-related goods. Entire societies were also reorganized for war. As men went to battle, women stepped in to undertake jobs that earlier only men were expected to do. So their system of working changed. Earlier, women who were only confined in their homes to do household work, now they substituted the men because men had to go to the war front. The war led to the snapping of economic links between some of the world's largest economic powers, which were now fighting each other to pay for them. So Britain borrowed large sums of money from US banks as well as the US public. Thus, the war transformed the US from being an international debtor to an international creditor. If you remember the condition of US during the Great Economic Depression, and now it became an international creditor. That means it helped other countries in finances. In other words, at the war's end, the US and its citizens owned more overseas assets than foreign governments and citizens owned in the US. Post-war recovery. Post-war economic recovery proved difficult. Britain, which was the world's leading economy in the pre-war period, in particular, faced a prolonged crisis. While Britain was preoccupied with war, industries had developed in India and Japan. After the war, Britain found it difficult to recapture its earlier position of dominance in Indian market and to compete with Japan internationally. Moreover, to finance war expenditures, Britain had borrowed liberally from the US. This meant that at the end of the war, Britain was burdened with huge external debts. The war had led to an economic boom, that is, to a great increase in demand, production, and employment. This was one positive effect of war, you can say. When the war boom ended, production contracted and unemployment increased. At the same time, the government reduced bloated war expenditures to bring them into line with peacetime revenues. These developments led to huge job losses. In 1921, 1 in every 5 British workers was out of work. Indeed, anxiety and uncertainty about work became an enduring part of the post-war scenario. Many agricultural economies were also in crisis. Consider the case of wheat producers. Before the war, Eastern Europe was a major supplier of wheat in the world market. When this supply was disrupted during the war, wheat production in Canada, America, and Australia expanded dramatically. But once the war was over, the production in Eastern Europe revived and created a glut in wheat output. Grain prices fell, rural incomes declined, and farmers fell deeper into debt. So you can see that every section of people in the society had to bear the consequences of the war. Rise of mass production and consumption. In the US, recovery was quicker. We have already seen how the war helped boost the US economy. After a short period of economic trouble in the years after the war, the US economy resumed in its strong growth in the early 1920s. One important feature in the US economy of the 1920s was mass production. The move towards mass production had begun in the late 19th century, but in the 1920s, it became a characteristic feature of industrial production in the US. A well-known pioneer of mass production was the car manufacturer Henry Ford, underline. He adapted the assembly line of a Chicago slaughterhouse in which slaughtered animals were picked apart by butchers as they came down to a conveyor belt to his new car plant in Detroit. Underline that he adopted the assembly line method. He realized that the assembly line method would allow a faster and cheaper way of producing vehicles. Keep on underlining this. The assembly line forced workers to repeat a single task mechanically and continuously, such as fitting a particular part to the car at a pace dictated by the conveyor belt. This was a way of increasing the output per worker by speeding up the pace of work. Standing in front of a conveyor belt, no worker could afford to delay the motions, take a break, or even have a friendly word with a workmate. As a result, Henry Ford's car came off the assembly line at 3-minute interval, of a speed much faster than the achieved by previous methods. The T model Ford was the world's first mass-produced car. So, this is how the assembly line method helped Ford to manufacture cars with more rapidity. This whole paragraph you must read 2-3 times more and try to learn what was the assembly line method. What tactics was adopted by adopting this method. At first, workers at the Ford factory were unable to cope with the stress of working on assembly lines in which they could not control the pace of work. So they quit in large numbers. Now children, after this one line is not very clearly printed in my book. I am coming to the next paragraph. Henry Ford recovered the high wage by repeatedly speeding up the production line and forcing workers to work even harder. So much so, he would soon describe his decision to double the daily wage as the best cost-cutting decision he had ever made. So, this proved to be a very beneficial method to Ford adopting the assembly line method because it helped in cutting cost. Fordist industrial practices soon spread in the US. They were also widely copied in Europe in the 1920s. Mass production lowered costs and prices of engineered goods. Thanks to higher wages, more workers could now afford to purchase durable consumer goods such as cars. Car production in the US rose from 2 million in 1919 to more than 5 million in 1929. Similarly, there was a spurt in the purchase of refrigerators, washing machines, radios, gramophone players, all through the system of hire purchase, that is, on credit repaid in weekly or monthly installments. The demand for refrigerators, washing machines, etc. was also fueled by a boom in house construction and home ownership, financed once again by loans. So this loan system helped the people to purchase costly goods and pay in installments. The housing and consumer boom of the 1920s created the basis of prosperity in the US. Large investments in housing and household goods seem to create a cycle of higher employment and incomes, rising consumption demand, more investment, and yet more employment and incomes. In 1923, the US resumed exporting capital to the rest of the world and became the largest overseas lender. US imports and capital exports also boosted European recovery and world trade and income growth over the next 6 years. All this, however, proved too good to last. By 1929, the world would be plunged into a depression such as it had never experienced before. So, in these paragraphs and on the previous page, you should remember why Ford adopted this assembly line method, what was that method, the whole procedure you should learn, and then how it created slowly how people started getting employment, how there was a boom in the prosperity of the people in the industrial sector, and then later on we will now study how it resulted into Great Depression, why this prosperity did not last long. The Great Depression. The Great Depression began around 1929 and lasted till the mid 1930s. During this period, most parts of the world experienced catastrophic declines in production, employment, incomes, and trade. The exact timing and impact of the depression varied across countries. That means different countries experienced this economic depression in different phases. The exact timing and impact of the depression varied across countries, but in general, agricultural regions and communities were the worst affected. Underline this. Agricultural regions and communities were the worst affected. This was because the fall in agricultural prices was greater, keep underlining, and more prolonged than that of the prices of industrial goods. That means the prices of goods fell rapidly and this fall in prices continued for a longer period. The depression was caused by a combination of several factors. Now pay attention. We have already seen how fragile the post-war world economy was. First, agricultural overproduction remained a problem. Pay attention, what were the causes of this Great Depression? Agricultural overproduction remained a problem. This was made worse by falling agricultural prices. Keep underlining and you have to learn all this. As prices slumped and agricultural incomes declined, farmers tried to expand production and bring larger volume of produce to the market to maintain their overall income. This worsened the glut in the market, pushing down prices even further. Farm produce rotted for a lack of buyers. So what was happening? The first reason was that agricultural production was in mass. It was too much and the number of buyers were not these many. So the bulk of production was brought to the places where it was expected that buyers could be found and they will buy them, so that less of wastage should be there of agricultural produce. But it actually did not happen, and it resulted in agricultural income declining rapidly. Second, in the mid 1920s, many countries financed their investments through loans from the US. Pay attention, again keep underlining and you have to learn all this. Many countries financed their investments through loans from the US. While it was often extremely easy to raise loans in the US when the going was good, US overseas lenders panicked at the first sign of trouble. In the first half of 1928, US overseas loans amounted to over 1 billion. A year later, it was 1/4 of that amount. Countries that depended crucially on US loans now faced an acute crisis. The withdrawal of US loans affected much of the rest of the world. Now this became a major problem. Till now US was giving loans, but now it withdrew from giving loans. The withdrawal of US loans affected much of the rest of the world, though in different ways. In Europe, it led to the failure of some major banks and collapse of currencies such as the British pound sterling. In Latin America and elsewhere, it intensified the slump in agriculture and raw material prices. The US attempt to protect its economy in the depression by doubling import duties also dealt another severe blow to world trade. So all these situations worsened the condition and resulted in the Great Depression. The US was also the industrial country most severely affected by the depression. With the fall in prices and the prospect of depression, US banks had also slashed domestic lending and called back loans. Farms could not sell their harvests, households were ruined, and businesses collapsed. Faced with falling incomes, many households in the US could not repay what they had borrowed and were forced to give up their homes, cars, and other consumer durables. The consumerist prosperity of the 1920s now disappeared in a puff of dust. As unemployment soared, people trucked long distances looking for any work they could find. Ultimately, the US banking system itself collapsed. Unable to recover investments, collect loans, and repay depositors, thousands of banks were bankrupt and were forced to close. By 1935, a modest economic recovery was underway in most industrial countries. But the Great Depression's wider effects on society, politics, and international relations and on people's minds proved more enduring. So we have seen that there were various factors which led to the economic depression and how the lives of the people ruined. How those countries were in trouble who had taken loans from the US. When US started withdrawing this policy of giving loans, then how it affected the rest of the world. Now children, I am stopping the class here today and you will have to go through each line very carefully. Whatever you have read today in Great Depression and whatever you have read today about the Ford's machine line method, please learn all that because that is important. It is often asked in the short answer type and in the long answer type. We will continue with a new heading in our next class, that is India and the Great Depression. Thank you.